When I was younger, I grew up in a small town near a wooded area. My family wasn't big, but it was loving. I had my mom and dad that lived in the town for a number of years before my birth. And after me was my little sister, Leslie. She was a mischievous child when we were kids. She would disappear for long periods of time to go goodness knows where. I was supposed to be looking after her, but it was damn near impossible to keep track of her as soon as my parents left. I never got in trouble though, because nearly on the dot, she'd be back in the house, looking out of breath, clutching the hand of her favourite doll. This doll always looked weird to me. A lot of people have an irrational fear of dolls, but this one always gave me a reason to feel unnerved. However, I could never place why. Something about it just looked off. When my parents asked us what we did, she'd always chime in first and regale wonderful tales of things that never happened. How we sat in my room and played video games, how I was great and looked after her all night, how we had so much fun, we never left each other's company. All of these were obviously lies. Lies hard to point out, as my parents always found it easier to believe I was being modest than my sister mysteriously disappearing for an oddly long periods of time. It frustrated me, the feeling of knowing full well I was right, however, never getting a sense of belief. Leslie would always just smile at me and go back to her room. I could never read that smile. Sometimes I look back and wonder if it was a veiled threat for me to keep up the lie for her own nefarious deeds, or maybe she believed she was somewhat doing me a favour for making me out to be a golden star. Something I was always rewarded for, despite my protests. To me, it didn't matter. A mix of fear for her safety and pure childlike curiosity, I wanted to know the truth. So, I set about the task of making sure I could follow Leslie on her next little adventure. It was sometimes random when both my parents would be gone at the same time and would leave me in charge of my sister. But a constant event was an evening service with a local church. They often had regular meetings with parents and would fill their ears with strange fear-mongering that never made sense to me at the time. Gossiping tales about phantasmal things out to get the kids, signs to look out for that your child is worshipping Satan, those sort of things. Just before they left, I made sure to sneak away Leslie's favourite doll. I was never fully sure, but something about how she always had it with her when she returned made me think it was an important part of her travels. My mind drumming up scenes of her doing little girly tea party role plays in the middle of the woods. Very Alice in Wonderland. The time came for her to disappear once again, when instead, I saw her frantically running around the house. She had mild panic on her face, something which made sense to me. If I'd lost my favourite toy, I'd have been distraught too. It didn't take long for me to cave in and wordlessly point her in the right direction, mumbling some excuse as to why I knew. Upon finding the doll, she lit up and went on her way. But because I was there when she left, I then had the chance to tail her at a distance. I started far at first, just about seeing which directions she moved. I'd almost lost her a number of times. When I saw she was never checking for anyone trailing her, I made my way closer and closer. Each yard I shortened with less care as I realised how easy this was going to be. The closer I got, the more I saw her demeanour. She was moving with purpose, like she knew every step of the way to her destination, as if it were her daily commute to school. The directions got hazy as we edged into the nearby forest and soon cut deep into the thick of a section that was unfamiliar to me. We slinked around some large trees, oaks that looked older than the trees in the usual hangout spots and trails. Soon she started to slow, as if approaching something important. So I followed suit and made sure not to draw any attention with breaking twigs or the rustling of leaves. The noise I never expected to hear, however, were the sounds of voices. A mild, childish social anxiety kicked in, and I stayed in the shadows, scared I was intruding. A remnant from the don't interrupt others parenting that was drilled into me at a younger age. Leslie sounded cheery, like she was greeting a lifelong friend. She called out many names, each responding with a strange voice unlike anyone I recalled from school. They sounded raspy, yet not adult. A strange combination compared to the usually clean and high-pitched voices most kids her and my age had. If I had to compare it to the most familiar thing I could, it was like when a kid did a horrible impression of their decrepit grandmother. Each voice rasped back to her in cheer, each greeting her by name too. The formality ran my mind back to my suspicion that she was doing little girly tea parties. However, it didn't line up to my idea that she was doing it alone. Curiosity ran through me, and before I thought about my actions, I had already stepped around and dawdled out my thoughts. What I saw briefly took my breath away, freezing me in place. Around Leslie, riddled around the branches, were a wide variety of discarded-looking dolls. Each one was different and had strange features that made them look a little off. At my entrance, all the heads turned in unison. It was surreal seeing all their heads turn without the bodies reacting. "Leslie, what's going on?" I muttered with a perplexed tone. "No!" she yelled back, which shut me right up. Before I could get out any response, figuring out why she replied like that, the doll spoke up. "You told someone. You told our secret. This was not something for you to share. You promised," one of the dolls bellowed. The severity of the situation didn't hit me, but Leslie broke down in fear. She begged and pleaded with the dolls. She said in every way she could vocabularize that this was a misunderstanding and that she never told a soul. Sadly, these words fell on deaf, plastic ears. Wordlessly, the pitter-patter of plastic clicking on wood and dirt resounded. Very quickly, they were upon her. Fight or flight kicked in, and my body immediately fell on flight. My reaction was to get an adult. The idea of Leslie wandering into the woods alone was beyond me. What was happening before me had me entirely bewildered. I heard sharp taps behind me as I sprinted, the sound of short legs trying their hardest to keep up, but failing. Though the noise was chilling, it was miles more bearable than the frantic, panicked screams that echoed from further behind. I got home, and remembering my parents weren't in, I pulled up the phone they left for emergencies and quickly dialed my parents. Frantically, I stuttered out all I could. I didn't need to say much, my tone telling volumes more than my words. They hastily arrived home, and I pulled at them to follow me into the woods. It took me a while to track back to where I'd remembered going. the darkness settling in, creating both confusion and a sense of dread. When we finally made the last turn to the clearing where the dolls were, no plastic could be seen. The area was devoid of any hint of a doll. What did remain was my sister, torn up and discarded in shreds. We didn't linger. My parents immediately suspected it was a pack of wild animals and frantically dialed any emergency service they could. But to me, I saw something different. To me, they were the markings of the sharp ends of tiny doll fingers.